All right, guys, we're back. The next thing I wanted to talk about, because I know Daphne's had a lot of success with this, is time based manifesting. And in the example you just gave at the resort, well, there was an incredible time pressure there. I mean, you guys were going to not have have a place to stay if you didn't manifest in a certain time frame. So, how this is kind of complicated because, well, time can time can be overly complicated, but what are some other time based manifestations you've had, and what is your general approach to tying a manifestation to a certain time? Like, how have you achieved this particular kind of success that I know a lot of people are very interested in?
Sure. So, first and foremost, time is an illusion, as everything is an illusion. Um, for me, time has really come in handy, particularly at work. I love to manifest time-based resolutions, very much where I have absolutely decided to go ahead and do like a winning project on Monday and then manifest like the subsequent winning project on that same Thursday and made sure that they didn't like go during the same time frame so I would have enough time to kind of focus on both and then keep on doing at work. But time is an illusion, as everyone and everything is an illusion, and even yourself is really just an illusion and an experience that God is created. I think most simply, the Bible so beautifully puts what manifestation is. When the subconscious and the conscious mind agree and become one, it is real. For so much of my life, I thought Israel was this country in the Middle East, and that's what the Bible was talking about. But no, it is most definitively when the conscious and the subconscious mind decide on the manifestation, it is real. And with that, you can dictate the time of that manifestation. And so for me, it really was that first big manifestation of the Supreme Court ruling, which was very time based, um, and very public, that had to be done within a certain amount of time that came to fruition. And I came to the understanding that yes, you can time base any manifestation. You can dictate when you want it, what season, what hour. Very rarely do I really try to specify. Usually I try to go ahead and get it around a certain time frame, and I'm fairly happy about that. I can say, I'd really like this to happen in mid-June. I don't really specify when in mid-June, but usually around somewhere in mid-June, it just happens for me. Um, and you're able to go ahead and look at manifestations as you do through your imagination. Now, in the imagination, there is no time. You can pull up the past, the present, and the future all at once. That is the perspective that God has, that you have regarding time. And so, if everything exists all at once in your imagination, that is how you can pull this forward in this three-dimensional world. So, the understanding that things take time to manifest or need time to manifest, I've never bought into that, specifically because I've manifested so many things on a time based need. And I would say, I need this by this date. Or sometimes, especially at the very beginning, things were just out of my, or felt like they were out of my control, that I needed to manifest them by that time. And so I would just dictate the time, and sure enough, it would manifest. Um, what I find is that when people go ahead and have that delayed manifestation, has far more to do with attachment to fear or some other block that they're experiencing, and even that is an illusion, as all blocks are an illusion. But don't be afraid of manifesting things in a time sensitive way. And my suggestion is, if you want to go ahead and start, time manifesting, go ahead and ask for things that are silly, ridiculous, and put a date to them. I would love to see a purple poodle by April 1st. That, and whether you want to visualize that or you want to go ahead and script it, either or is fine. Something that I like to do, especially when it comes to kind of thinking about public events, a newspaper with a clear date on it. I can see the date of when this was published in the New York Times or the LA Times, pick your favorite newspaper, that this event happened or this really big amazing thing happened, and it came out in the newspaper, and I could see the date and when it happened. And I think also early on, when I would listen to Neville, and I would listen to his stories, and I know he also says that things take time to manifest, and he references the Bible on that. But then I realized he tells so many stories where he or people manifested time sensitive things, and they manifested in that time. And I think one of my favorite stories about Neville is a man who worked for a steel factory, and they were worried that the steel factory was going to go out of business as they had laid off so many people in a matter of, I think, a month or so. And then the man's wife urged the man to imagine that they didn't close that steel factory, that instead the factory became more successful. And although the man persistent, the wife decided to go ahead and manifest that the factory had a great deal of success, that they were able to keep the factory open, and the man was able to make more money and enough money to eventually reach retirement age and retire comfortably. And Neville really talked about the story about how the wife had manifested this, and this was a time-based manifestation. If that company didn't do well by a certain time period, it would have gone out of business. But this was a perfect example of something that came into fruition at the right time, that was designated by the person manifesting it, and that came into a large amount of abundance, not only for that family, but all those people who had worked for that steel factory. And I remember Neville also saying that all the employees that had been laid off were then called back to work at this factory. And so that, I think, is a perfect example of so many stories that Neville has that I've personally experienced, that time-based manifestation is absolutely something everyone can do.
So there was a couple of things you included there that I wanted to summarize. So firstly, you remind yourself of some certain core truths, that time is also your manifestation, and that everything's illusory, including the passage of time. You don't necessarily limit yourself by thinking something's going to take a certain amount of time. You always know that it's always now when you're imagining, so your decision to tie it to any given date or season is just as arbitrary as any other detail you're going to include in any decision or imaginal scene or affirmation, however you're going to, move into that state. It's just another part of it, right? But then also something you do that I think is a good way to do it for people who are just getting started in doing this is that you've picked things that already have a time attached and then manifest their outcome. Like with the Supreme Court case, they're going to rule on a certain date. So you know that. Or there is a certain time where that case is going to be reviewed by them and the decision is going to come out in those 2 or 3 days. So you already know there's a time attached. You're just picking the outcome, right?
Yes.
And another thing I know about you, and this is going to be different for every person, is that you're working with time a lot because there's a calendar. There's certain things that have to get done by a certain date when it comes to your work and everything. So you have an acute awareness of time, right?
Yes. And I think, that varies for people, but um, yes, it's something that I've been working with for a while now.
But I like your advice for people who want to try it, which is start trying it with a lot of those, or try it with things you have confidence about, right? So if you're very confident about the weather, like we are, pick weather for a certain date, which most people who've already doing weather manifestations are already doing that anyway, right? Because why otherwise would you, be so interested in changing the weather? But so pick those areas where you're confident, see that you can do it, and then transfer that confidence onto areas where, you think that time is going to be a little bit more vague, or it's going to be harder to get it by a certain deadline.
Absolutely. Build your faith.
So, do you remember when you first figured out that you could pick times for things? Like, it just part of naturally challenging yourself when it came to those first big manifestations? Like, was
No,
there, was
I was,
there one where you're like, oh, I can definitely do the time? Was it the Supreme Court one or something else?
no, I was just trying to prove that the law didn't work. Because
Right.
I said at the very beginning, to me this sounded so overwhelming, um and so this was one of those things that I said, look, okay, maybe this NCAA tournament was a fluke, but I'm gonna try it now with the Supreme Court, and it's surely gonna fail. And no, but sure enough, it just kept on happening. And so, but doing those really big manifestations at the very beginning also made it very clear for me that there is absolutely no limit to manifesting. And that really deep belief was quite wonderful, because then um, you know that you can really manifest everything and anything your heart desires. And so it was very much a stumbling block for me at the very beginning, although now it's been a number of years. And over time, I've definitely managed to learn more and, you know, um, really become an expert in some of those skills, um, in regards to how manifesting works. But, you know, as many stories as I have, nothing is ever going to be as good a teacher as you actually trying it for yourself.
And I know one another tip you've given about time before is that you just think of it like putting something on the calendar, like, oh, I'm just gonna put, like, you'd have a meeting with someone on a certain day. Well, I'll just put the manifestation later that day or whatever.
Yes,
You just think of
absolutely.
it like an appointment and assume it's gonna happen then. Which I think if people really analyze their mind, they'll see that they're doing that with appointments anyway. So just take it and apply it to the thing you want. All right.
Yes.